the happier I got, the healthier I got. Doctors telling you you'll never get better. Like, I got better. And that one other guy that I read about, there are at least two of us. People need to know this.
My guest in this episode is Raelan Agle. Raelan recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome in 2019 and has since started a YouTube channel where she interviews guests who have recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, and other conditions. In our conversation, we discuss what chronic fatigue syndrome is and Raelan's personal journey with it, including her struggles and the lessons that eventually led to her recovery. Enjoy. Welcome, Raelan. Very excited to have you here today. The tables have turned. You interviewed me back in December, and now I'm returning the favor. Very excited to talk about myalgic encephalomyelitis. I've been practicing that.
Thank you.
Also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, and also to learn more about your journey and share that with our listeners.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This was a great opportunity. I appreciate it.
So let's dig right in. What is myalgic encephalomyelitis? Chronic fatigue syndrome. From now on, I'm going to be referring to it as ME/CFS or just CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. So what is it, and what are the symptoms that people should be looking out for?
Chronic fatigue syndrome can display itself in a few different ways, but generally is characterized, a big one, as the name suggests, is severe debilitating fatigue. And this one is a tough one to explain because most people feel tired and they think, oh yes, I get run down too, but it's so much more than that. It can level you. It's the kind of tired that you can't push through. And some interesting components around the fatigue that you might notice when you have something like ME/CFS is that, one, it's not made better by rest or by sleep. Because at first, when I first got it, I thought, okay, I'm just really run down and I'm just going to rest and I'm going to rest and I'm going to rest. And I rested for months. It doesn't matter how much sleep you get, how much time you spend in bed. You don't feel any less tired. And very simple things can exacerbate that fatigue. So they call it post-exertional malaise. So it can be very small amounts of physical activity or mental activity, and it can lay you out. And you get this sort of flu-like feeling after that can last for a day, 2 days. Some people, it can last for weeks, which can be a really hard thing to get used to because, at least in many of the people that I speak to that come down with this condition, because I've interviewed a lot of people who have had it and recovered or almost recovered, and so many of them were super active people before, like just athletes, overachievers, running marathons. So to go from running marathons to all of a sudden walking up one flight of stairs can leave you laid out in bed for 2 days is a really tough thing to understand, especially when it can come on so quickly for some people. So that fatigue is a big one. But there's a lot of other stuff that can come along with it. Like there are cognitive symptoms that a lot of people experience. The term most people use is brain fog, and it just generally sums up that difficulty thinking, problems with memory, problems with word recall, just feeling like there's a fog in your brain, and all of a sudden it's really difficult to hold a conversation or to put together an intelligent sentence, to remember what you had for breakfast. Everything's just kind of a mess. And there are a bunch of other symptoms, and it can vary from person to person, and not everybody gets all of them. But, pain, joint body pain can be a big one. And orthostatic intolerance is also a common one that seems to go along with this. A lot of people get a sensitivity to light and sound and smells and chemicals. I remember someone had even this, I remember going for a massage while I was still living with ME/CFS, and they had quiet spa music on in the background, and I had to ask them to turn it off because the stress it was on my system was just, I couldn't bear it, which is such a strange thing to think about because that's usually such a soothing thing. So all of a sudden, these really minor things that we can normally tolerate or even enjoy with our senses become physically uncomfortable to have them. And, some people have gastrointestinal problems. And some symptoms that are common that a lot of people with ME/CFS have are depression and anxiety. However, at least the vast majority of the people that I talk to, it's more as a result. So is it brought on by the illness, or is it just because I used to run marathons and now I can't get up the stairs? So of course I'm depressed, and so many things seem to make me feel worse. So I'm just full of anxiety, which is going to happen to anyone. So the symptoms really can vary, but that sums up a lot of the main ones that people can experience with ME/CFS.
Thanks for giving us such a thorough overview. I can imagine that it must be devastating, being super active and then, or if you had an active lifestyle and then you are diagnosed with CFS or long COVID, and your life just kind of feels like it stops. I'm curious to understand more about your journey with CFS. When did you realize that you had it, and what was the story for you of really coming to terms with the diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome?
Well, looking at the onset of my condition, it can help you to understand a little bit the overlap with long COVID, because mine came on, like for a lot of people, after a bad virus. So a lot of us initially got told we had some sort of post-viral condition. So we got something, a really bad flu, and then we just never got better, which is what we're clearly seeing with a lot of people with long COVID as well. And it's been interesting because I've been sharing stories and information on my YouTube channel for ME/CFS, and more just people with long COVID were there showing up looking for information because their doctors were saying, we think this is ME/CFS as well, or maybe it's the same thing. So for me, it wasn't the pandemic, but it was just a really bad flu. And I was laid out, like really laid out for, I think, a solid 7 days. I couldn't go to work. And then I went back to work. I was feeling a bit better. And then I started to feel worse again. And then I feel a little bit better. And it was really confusing because it felt like I had this flu that went away. And then I didn't understand, like, do I have another flu again already? Like, I've never in my life have I had a flu that just came back. So, but who also gets a second flu a week later? Like, how unhealthy am I if I'm picking up so many things? And I just did what all people do in these situations. You start going to your doctor, you explain what's going on, they do the usual battery of tests. And for like many people, everything came back normal. So it was just sort of a wait it out and this should get better, but all your tests are fine. So there's nothing to do here. But I wasn't fine. And I had to keep calling in sick for work and, used up all my sick days, and eventually was taking time off without work, and went back to my doctor and said, I need some support. Like I need some sort of short-term leave from work or a reduced work schedule just until we figure this out. And my doctor said, kind of incredulously, how am I supposed to fill out any paperwork for you? There's nothing wrong with you. And it was really tough because, like many of us, up until that point in my life, my doctor was going to be the person who saved me. I certainly wasn't going to be the one to figure out. And she's telling me I'm fine. I'm feeling like I've been kidnapped from my life because I can't do anything anymore. I can't socialize. I can't exercise. I can't barely ever get to work. And so it was a big shock to the system, this all coming on.
Wow. Yeah, that must have been extremely difficult. I've heard many stories and I've had my own experiences in, the medical industry here in the United States where the doctor says it's nothing or it's this or it's that. And then, symptoms persist until eventually something happens. And, sometimes it's a mix of, your own research kind of might be leading the doctor in a certain direction, right? Or, just pushing enough times that the right diagnosis is made, right? I'm curious for you, how did you eventually get to this CFS diagnosis?
Well, I should have been able to self-diagnose. I should have known exactly what it was, but there was a lot of denial going on because I grew up with my mother got really sick when she was about 30 years old, incidentally, same age as when I got sick. And she never did recover. She just deteriorated and she was diagnosed with CFS. So I was acutely aware of what CFS was, and I saw how it obliterated her life. It was absolutely horrible. So my whole life I was refused that or I was determined that I would never get that, as if it was that simple. But I really just thought kind of mind over matter. I'm like, that's not going to be me. That is the worst case scenario. So I couldn't even entertain that that could be happening to me. So I started, but through my research trying to help out her, I'd come across some labs in the US because I'm Canadian. I was in Canada at the time that did more extensive testing than what our National Healthcare Service provides. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to go get some testing and see what's happening with me, which led me to an integrative medicine doctor who did do a ridiculous amount of tests. I spent tens of $1,000s on tests and supplements and all sorts of stuff. And he ended up diagnosing me with chronic fatigue syndrome. And he knew my history with it, so he was very reluctant to do it, but all the signs were there that that's what it was. And he really encouraged me not to latch onto the label too much, but just, if for nothing else, we were going to need this so I could get some time off from work. So for me, getting that CFS diagnosis was like a death sentence. I think there is any other diagnosis in the world that you could have given me that would have been less scary and less hopeless for me than this one, just because I grew up watching it and it was a nightmare. So getting this was crushing. It was really tough.
I could only imagine. It seems like it might have transitioned from a mentality of, hey, mental strength, I'm not going to get CFS, I'm not going to get CFS, to a kind of deep surrender and acceptance.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, I have this. What do I do with this now? How did you respond to that, emotionally, once you had to accept and surrender that you had it?
Yeah, I was terrified and refused to live a life with it because I'd already seen exactly what that looked like. So I decided I was going to throw everything I had at it. Like I was either going to get better or not keep living. Like there was no future where I was going to spend the next 50 years with chronic fatigue syndrome. I just couldn't do it. So me and my husband, now ex-husband, but he was very supportive, and we just tried everything, did everything. The integrative medicine doctor that I was seeing was really good. He didn't have all the answers, but he was very much about empowering me to do my own research, him doing his own research. Let's try different things together. He was very thorough. He was very supportive. He believed me. He believed that I could get better or at least see some significant improvement. So I just spent about 2 years doing everything he told me and everything that every book told me to do. I was taking about 100 pills a day in supplements and medication, which was almost all prescribed by my doctor. Doing things like antivirals. I was doing, for a while, I thought it was chronic Lyme disease. So I was doing heavy doses of long-term antibiotics. I was doing hormone replacement therapy. I completely changed my diet. I was doing, all the cleansing and juicing and fasting and dry skin brushing and saunas. And I just, everything. Like I could probably list off 50 things. I was doing acupuncture. I was doing one of those like it didn't matter if there was any science to back it. If one person said it helped them, I was going to try it. And I was just, whatever energy I had, I put into going out and doing these things. And I was fortunate that for most of this time, even though quite often physically I was laid out, I could still read. So I was reading, averaging about 4 books a week, just devouring as much as I could. People how did they recover from cancer? How did they recover from diabetes? Just learning everything I could, and getting my house tested for mold, and getting rid of all the toxic chemicals in my house, and only eating organic food, and just really an insane all-in healing mission. And I was a mess this whole time, just severely depressed, really stressed, really scared. So not in a good state to heal. It was just this sort of frantic, like, operation save my life or else. That helped a little bit. I'd say a couple years in, I used to say I was about 50% better, but I wasn't 50% better. I tried after about 2 years to go back to work 2 days a week for 4 hours at a time. And I couldn't do it. I would end up laying on my desk, just exhausted. So I eventually just had to outright quit my job and just got to this kind of horrible, depressed place. This is it. I just spent 2 years. I tried everything that I can find. I don't know what else to try. This little bit of improvement seems to be all I'm going to get. I've now quit my job. At this point, I had got divorced from my husband or separated. I moved back in with my dad. Like I was in my 30s, living in my childhood home with no job, now single, sick. Like it was not a good place to be. I can laugh about it now, but at the time it was just wow.
I can only imagine. I mean, fighting for multiple years, having your life completely upended, um, and you, I mean, you fought for a long time, right? When was the turning point for you? What shifted after this 2-year journey of fighting that led to, the Raylan that you are today?
Interesting. There were two main specific places where things started to turn around a bit. And one was after spending a few months living at my dad's house, severely depressed, severely hopeless, and just in one of the worst places I've ever been in my life. Pretty much given up on healing because I didn't know what else to do. And my husband and I had sold our house, and we had made a decent amount of money from the sale of the house because the housing market had gone up. So I had some money sitting in the bank. And, I try and always keep this upbeat and, it's people listening, if you're going through this, I know things can be heavy and depressing enough, but I also don't want to gloss over how how hard these times can be because I know so many people can relate. Because I was in a place where I was ready to die. I, um, I couldn't keep going. I wasn't going to keep living my life this way. I'd seen what my mom's looked like, and I wasn't going to live my life like that. But I wasn't going to die with all that money in the bank. And I'd always wanted to do more traveling. And I was still really sick, and I didn't know how I was going to travel. But I thought, if I have to crawl around the world, or if I'm just even in bed most of the time, but I'm in a bed in a different country, that will be better than being in my childhood home with my dad. I love my dad. He's amazing, but it feels like such a step backwards, once you're an adult. So I decided I just booked myself a trip. I booked myself a ticket to Bangkok, and I ended up spending about a year backpacking somehow. I couldn't work a 4-hour shift, but I could find enough energy to do little bits. And I had to rest a lot and take a lot of naps and take a lot of days off. But something about that surrender of giving up on the healing obsession and just trying to find something that could bring some joy in my life again. Like I need to figure out a way to see that there is some happiness in this world. And the happier I got, the healthier I got. It wasn't the full answer. I was still struggling every single day, but that probably got me to 50% recovered. That gave me significant improvement, just removing the stress and having all of this joy and adventure in my life. It was addictive, and it helped me feel better. It's one of the first insights I saw how all activity isn't created equal, because I could do 4 hours of activity of something that I enjoyed and generally be okay. But 4 hours of activity of something stressful, like my stressful social worker job that I was doing, could lay me out for days. So I started to slowly understand that component of it's not just how much physical ability or effort you're putting out there, it's the state that your mind, your body, your nervous system is in that impacts the symptoms that you're experiencing. So that was the first one. Just kind of being happy again and getting out of this haze of severe depression and thinking, okay, maybe there is something to life worth living. And I was so happy backpacking. I never wanted it to end. Um, and I just kind of kept going. I found small jobs and I found ways to keep myself afloat. And I ended up staying in Southeast Asia for over 8 years. But every day was hard. There wasn't a single day where I was just well. There wasn't a single day where I could just get through the day and there would be no challenges. I was constantly pushing too hard and having crashes and really struggling to keep up with my life. But I had these little pockets of good also. But then I met my now husband when I was living in Malaysia. And I realized I was at a point where this okay quality of life that I had built, was still too hard. I couldn't keep going through the rest of my life where every single day was a struggle, where every single day was so stressful. Like, how am I going to get through that birthday party? How am I going to get through that 2-hour meeting at work? And I knew I had to just finally get back into that kind of operation save myself mode. And I'd seen little things over the years that had promise and could help me. But since I was trying to keep up like jobs and just the responsibilities of life, I'd never had enough energy to put into it. Like for a while, I got into scuba diving. And I was surprised how, as I slowly started doing more scuba diving, I was building up physical strength and I was able to do more. Never would have thought that because I truly did struggle with stairs. So I saw that there were certain things that somehow could get me better. And if I could just put all my focus into that, that I believed I would get there. So Jeffrey, my now husband, was very supportive, and I ended up moving in with him and quitting my job and just went all in on healing again and put together this healing program for myself. And I was just in this healing bubble, and everything was about supporting my body's own ability to heal itself because I'd given up on the world on having any answers for me. And I really just believed under the right conditions, my body could do what it needed to do. So I was supporting my lymphatic system and getting, sunshine and sleeping at all costs. I had, like a 27-point regimen for making sure I slept well. And at times I was taking prescription sleep medication, whatever it took. And I switched to a vegan diet, which seemed to be working really well for me. I no longer think that that's a key component for recovery. I might have just been coincidence or maybe placebo, but it just at the time was working really well. And the biggest one was a slowly increasing exercise program, but it was so gradual that I started with just 1 minute a day. And it might just be like some push-ups off my wall or just like some arm circles. It was just 1 minute a day where I would move. And then my plan was that every week I would up it by a minute. So for the next week, 2 minutes I would move. And the whole way, these little bits of increasing energy would initially make me feel worse. But then by the next week, I could do that 2 minutes, no problem at all. And then 3 minutes would make me feel a little bit worse. But then by the next week, 3 minutes was no problem. So I did this for about a year. And by the end of the year, I could go to the gym for an hour, do strength training, push as hard as I wanted, no post-exertional malaise. And I was all good. So within a year, I was close to fully recovered. Within a year and a half to 2 years, I was totally 100%.
That is an amazing journey. I'm struck by so you were in operation mode round one, right? And then you took some time off, took a hiatus, and found sort of joy and true surrender, which seemed to give you a certain level of vitality and appreciation of life. And then you kind of went back into sort of an operational mode, right? And I'm curious, what do you think the key mindset difference was between the second time you went on your healing kind of operational journey and the first time you went on the healing operational journey that really you think was a key mindset shift for you that led to you being able to actually heal this time?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it was a dramatically different mindset. The first time it was this frenetic, stressed out, desperate, lost, didn't know if anything I was doing was going to help, hopeless state. And the second time, I really believed that I was going to recover. I had seen little bits, like I said, with the scuba diving, or sometimes we'd rent a little pedal bike and pedal around, Cambodia or something. I'm like, wow, I can really do this and I feel okay. So I'd seen that slowly increasing activity seemed to be helping me get better. And I'd also read one book by one person who recovered. In the beginning, I hadn't heard of anybody. So I had one person. I'm like, okay, if he could do it, I could do it. I have these things that I think can help. And the last component of this is that I had more of a sense of peace with the symptoms. I accepted that I was going to have to feel worse to get better because I could tell that every time I extended my activity or, tried something new that I hadn't been doing in a long time, my body kind of pushed back and gave me these symptoms. And I realized that as long as I was very careful and did it very gradually and in a safe way, that those symptoms, I knew they were coming and it was just okay. Whereas before, they would come and that would send me into a massive state of stress. Like, oh no, I'm getting worse. What I'm doing isn't working. I'm never going to get better. And the whole spiral happens. Whereas this time, like, okay, yeah, I upped it to 3 minutes this week. Feeling a little bit worse today. We knew that was going to happen. It's totally fine. This is the process. So I think just that hope, that belief in recovery, that more relaxed, at peace mindset, the acceptance of the process and that the symptoms were going to be there and it wasn't going to be this perfect linear process. And also just putting a really strong focus on my mental health. So being in a loving relationship with a supportive person helped a lot. I did a ton of journaling and looking at, past traumas and unpacking things from my life and counseling. And so it was a much more supporting my mental health, whereas before I was just very much focused on my body and doing 1,000 different interventions to try and fix things separately in this really stressed out state. So a really different approach the second time around.
So it seems like acceptance, surrender were a big part of that mindset shift. And you kind of took this more almost like an exposure therapy approach where you're like, hey, I'm going to do this. It's going to hurt a little bit, but I know I'm going to be okay. I know if I keep doing this, I'm going to get better. You mentioned bike riding in Cambodia, right? That might have been a difficult thing in the past when you're in really like control mode. I'm doing this to get better, but in a state of sort of, hey, I'm just doing this to have fun, right? The intentionality that we take into activities can actually change our experience of the activity, even if it's the same activity, right? Doing something in a sort of laissez-faire space of just because it's joyful or whatever can be a very different mental space than trying to do something because it's going to lead to a particular outcome, right? So there's this kind of like controlling the outcomes mindset versus I'm doing this just for the act itself. And that can lead to a different psychological and perhaps even physiological experience of an activity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I'm riding this bike to save my life. And if I can't do it, my life is over versus I'm riding this bike to have some fun. If I can't do it and I get tired, I just get off.
Yeah, giving yourself that grace.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, after all of this journey and you're looking back on it now, what do you think some of the most significant lessons you learned were that you think might help other people in a similar situation, that are experiencing CFS or long COVID, or just general life lessons that you think might apply to anybody in life?
I think the biggest one is not giving up. I mean, you talk to anyone who's ever tried to achieve anything in life, no matter what it is. Is it Beyonce who was famous for the quote or something? Like, the smartest thing I did was never give up. It's just that perseverance. And it sounds easier said than done because when you've had to pick yourself up 1,000 times, it can be hard. And when you've been let down by treatments and protocols and doctors countless times, and YouTubers and coaches or articles or podcasts or whatever, it can be really easy to get jaded. And I saw this in my mother. She definitely 100% gave up by the end, and did end up taking her own life. And even in my own journey, you know, even in those years when I was kind of coasting in Asia, living some sort of quality of life, I gave up on the world having anything to offer that was going to help me to heal. Like, I was just really jaded and pessimistic. So I just stopped looking. And now that I do what I do and I talk to so many people, I'm like, wait, you had a program running like near the end when I was still sick. Like, I could have used that. I didn't know that existed. So I think that it's okay you don't have to be constantly searching, and it's good to take breaks from it, but to not lose hope in people having something to offer. And we're learning so much, every week, every month about all of this, that the information is changing at such a rapid rate. So just not to give up and not to get too jaded, and to, trust yourself and trust your own intuition and what you feel is right. But also, you don't have to do it alone. And there's a lot of information out there. So that's a big one. I think I could have sped up my recovery if I hadn't been so on the end, like, I'm alone. Like, even, when I really got serious at the end, and I say it took me about 2 years to get fully back, like where I was running again, working full time, traveling, working out at the gym, working 2 jobs, like living a chaotic life that I probably shouldn't be living. But to get back to that place, I think I could have got there a lot faster if I had understood what was happening in my recovery. Because the biggest insight, aside from not giving up by far from the hundreds, if not thousands of people I've talked to by now, is that for a lot of people, paying attention to the autonomic nervous system and the body's threat assessment systems, our limbic system, what's happening in our amygdalae, is really important. I understand things and I see things differently now, like with my slowly increasing exercise program. Those arm circles for a minute weren't about building up strength in my arms. My arms had the ability to do that. It was, like you said, it was almost like how people address a phobia. I interviewed someone who was a phobia therapist, and they said it's very similar. It's that gradual reintegration. It's gradual exposure to things. So it was teaching my body, okay, 1 minute of activity is safe. 2 minutes is safe. 3 minutes is safe. So understanding how our threat assessment systems in our body work, how big of a role they play in creating symptoms in our body. And, most of us were brought up to believe that symptoms live where we feel them in the body. If we feel them in the knee, they're in the knee. If they're in the arm, they're in the arm. And then that's where we're going to fix them by doing something there. But so many of those symptoms are generated by our brain, by our autonomic nervous system. And then they're also turned off by our brain and our autonomic nervous system. I used to think of these symptoms as just sort of random suffering coming out of nowhere with no meaning. And by understanding them as messages from your body and alarm bells trying to alert you to something, then you start to piece together what's happening. And when you think about our threat assessment systems having evolved to thrive in an environment that looks nothing like the one that we now live in, it's understandable that they might be a bit oversensitive or overreactive and not understanding Reddit and traffic jams and the news and the 8 screens in front of us and all of these modern things that they weren't designed to face. So there's a bit of retraining and a bit of teaching your brain, your limbic system that that the world is safe. Because I realized through being sick, I started building up new neural pathways in the brain where everything in the world was a danger. Like leaving my apartment, danger. Sitting up too long, danger. Spending too much time on my computer, danger. Just everything triggers symptoms. And there was a process of rewiring that and creating new neural pathways where it's like, okay, walking, safe. Going to work, safe. And it's going to be not the same thing for everybody. Of course, since we have hundreds of millions of people with long COVID and ME/CFS around the world, they're going to have different things going on in their body. And you have to check for structural abnormalities. And if those things exist, they, of course, need to be addressed. But for a large chunk of people, there seemed to be this really strong component of working with the autonomic nervous system and the limbic system and those threat assessment systems. And this being a really key piece, if not the whole puzzle, but maybe just a really big piece that helps them to get back where they were. And nobody was talking about this 10 years ago. So, and now it's smacking me in the face everywhere. Like there's no denying it. The science is there. The research is there. We know this now to be true.
That's very, very powerful. And I think relates to a lot of things. The act of being aware of what's happening internally for us, right? Somatic awareness. It's a big part of mindfulness, and it's a big part of sort of living in an integrated way where we can see the impact that external stimuli have on our internal state of being, whether that manifests in the body or in our mind and our thoughts. I'm curious because for people with CFS or long COVID or these conditions, they may have, I'm guessing, difficulty really tuning in to what's happening in the body because it might feel overwhelming, right? Like, oh, this thing's happening. I'm experiencing this pain again. It's overwhelming. Doesn't feel great, right? What helped you actually be able to tune into what was happening in your body and kind of develop that muscle slowly? Because that's something that I imagine that can be very challenging to do in the first place, but especially if all these threat signals are going off. What do you think helped you with that?
Yeah, this is why I say I could have probably done this quicker if I had known everything I do now, because I did not understand what was happening at the time. But I did understand enough to see that, okay, certain things are triggering symptoms. Whereas for years, it felt like they were just random, just sort of coming out of nowhere. I didn't know what to expect on any given day, any given hour. Like how I noticed that, okay, little bits of physical activity seemed to make me feel worse. Being in stressful situations seemed to make me feel worse. So I started just logging for myself what these different things were that seemed to relate to some symptoms. I did not have it all figured out for sure. But that was the best I could do, was just to try and notice patterns and then try and either minimize those things that were bringing them on, or avoid them altogether. What I didn't realize at the time either is that, there are things that you can do in those moments, to help or to mitigate those symptoms or potentially even get rid of them altogether. So yeah, there's so much more information available now. It's really nice, really good.
Nice. Well, one resource that we're going to be talking about in a bit is the Autonomic Nervous System Rebalancing Journal that we've developed in collaboration with you. And I'm excited to get to that. But before we get there, I wanted to talk about the role of community in your journey. We know community is important for various things, but especially for people who are navigating CFS and other sorts of challenges. What was the role of community in your journey? Where did it help? And how did you find it?
I think this is so important, and it's something I could have benefited having more from. When I was still living with ME/CFS, I wanted nothing to do with anyone else who had it, because somehow I thought it would make it more real, or if I got connected to that community, I would never get rid of it. Like, this is just like, I'm in this for life. Like, it was a protective mechanism. And the few times I'd pop my head out into different forums, what I was seeing felt not helpful. It felt kind of depressing and negative. So I decided the best thing for me to do was to build a community of people around me who knew nothing about chronic fatigue syndrome, and for the most part didn't even know I had it. Aside from my Jeffrey, now husband, I didn't like to talk about it. And I actually found that for me, not talking about it served me really well. Those first couple of years when I was sick, I talked about it incessantly, focused on every little symptom. And by not giving all of that a voice all of the time seemed to help me a lot. What I would do differently, or what I see what people are doing now, which is better, is that because we have a lot more available now, because now I've talked to so many people who have connected with people in the ME/CFS community or long COVID community. And it's strangers, people that they've never met. They just meet online, but they connect, they click, and it's incredible what a support they can be to each other through their healing journey. I've interviewed two different times, two women and once two men that just connected, and they just chatted every day, maybe a quick text, but they would hold each other accountable. They would give each other encouragement. They'd help each other on the bad days, and they just worked on their recovery together. And gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. So there is so much potential to help yourself through this if you can surround yourself with some people who truly get it. And the thing that you need to be careful about is that there still are online a ton of forums, calling themselves support groups or supportive places, but they're really not. From what I can tell, they are very negative. You're not allowed to say that recovery is a real thing. It's a lot of gaslighting, people competing to see whose symptoms are the worst. And I get it. People are in a rough place and they're just doing the best they can. And this is, the mindset they're coming from. So just to seek out spaces that are optimistic and recovery focused. Like, I did start a Facebook group, and it's in the group rules that you must be optimistic. There is no venting. There is no gaslighting. It is recovery focused, and people come there because it's a safe space where they can connect with like-minded people. So I think it can be really important. But you have to be very careful, because the vast majority of people that I've talked to that recovered said eventually they had to cut out all of that community because they just couldn't find the right space and it was doing them more harm than good. So I think it has so much potential and it's worth seeking out. Just make sure you're finding spaces that just your gut and your heart tell you, like, yeah, this is good. This is going to help me.
That makes a lot of sense. And the key aspect of hope also relates to a guest that I spoke with last week, who's a positive psychologist, and the power of focusing on the positive things, focusing on the areas that we want to go toward rather than constantly focusing on the areas that we want to avoid or the negative areas, right? And speaking of community, you've created quite a community of your own. You mentioned the Facebook group, but you also have a YouTube channel, and you're consistently sharing stories of people who have gone through CFS, long COVID, fibromyalgia, a bunch of other conditions that I've seen on there, and people who are sharing their recovery stories. I'm curious what inspired you to start creating content and creating community around this topic.
When I could properly tell that I was almost recovered. I was doing my whole thing that last couple of years and I was almost there and I could see the trajectory. I'm like, I just got to keep doing what I'm doing and I'm going to get there. Like, I'm almost recovered. I'm like, I almost did this. 10 years. And my mom, 27 years, never got better. We suspect her mother had it as well and also never got better. All these people all over the world, doctors telling you you'll never get better. Like, I got better. And that one other guy that I read about, there are at least two of us. People need to know this. So I just felt really strongly that I had a story to tell. I'd learned so much through it. So initially it started just by telling my own story. I wrote a book that was just called Finding Freedom. That's just all about my own story. The first half of it reads like a memoir. So just, telling my journey of becoming sick, what that was like, kind of like the laughs, the highs, the lows. And then the second part walks you through step by step what I did to recover. Like I've said, even now I have a different understanding of what was really leading to my recovery. So I think that's a good book if you just want to not feel alone and just kind of hear someone else's journey. It's not necessarily going to have all your recipe for getting out of this. So I wrote the book and then I realized when you write a book and nobody knows who you are, nobody knows what the book is, and nobody reads the books. I'm like, well, that was kind of a fail. But I really wanted to get this information out. And like a lot of people, when I first got sick, I made this really desperate but genuine plea to the universe that if they would just help me find a path out of this, like not magically fix it, but just, help me get on the right path, help me get there, that I will do everything I can to share the information about how I got there. And this was still from a bit of a naive place of what worked for me will work for everybody. It's been a journey. So I started an Instagram account. I started my YouTube channel, and I just started first by sharing my own story. And then I realized really quickly that that was not going to be anywhere near enough. And I started hearing about the odd person here or there that also recovered. They'd message me on Instagram and be like, oh my goodness, I also recovered. I never hear about anybody. This is so great. So then I thought, okay, I need to interview all these other people who have recovered and get them on my channel. And I really thought I'd find maybe 5. I'm like, I'll find 5 in the world and then I'll be tapped out, but I'll get those 5 out. And I started doing that. And the people just kept coming. And in the beginning, I was looking for them, but very quickly they were just seeking me out. And it didn't take long, until this day where I have a really long back wait list. There are so many people recovered out there excited to tell their story. So it just sort of grew organically. And I thought, okay, let's do recovery stories. Who else can we interview? I'm like, maybe there's some doctors. And now there's more and more doctors reaching out to me that want to come on the channel and share, their experience of treating long COVID and ME/CFS and the things that they're finding helpful. So it's just been a slowly evolving journey of wanting to get information and hope out there. And initially it was mostly just about hope. Like I just wanted people to see that it was possible. And I thought if all this ever accomplishes is hope, that's more than enough. But now we've come to the place, this channel's been running for about 4 years now. People are coming to me and saying, yeah, I'm fully recovered because of something I found on your channel. And now I'm interviewing them about that. So it's been mind-blowing. It's been such an crazy, rewarding, important part of my journey that I'm so grateful I've had the opportunity to do. Yeah.
It's an incredible journey that you've been on. And I actually realized that I didn't ask you what recovery means to you. And I think it might be helpful for people who might be, experiencing CFS or long COVID and They're wondering what actually is recovery? What is this thing that I'm hoping for? So what does being fully recovered mean to you? What does it feel like to you?
It's a really good question, and something I think I oversimplified initially, and it's a little bit more complex than a simple answer. When I first recovered, when I say after about 2 years I was fully recovered, what that meant to me was that I could do everything I could do before I got sick without symptoms, plus more. So I had, there wasn't anything else I could throw at my life. Like I said, travel, working full time, working multiple jobs, working out hard, just everything. And I felt okay. So I'm like, this is fully recovered. And also the term fully recovered was really important for me mentally. Because at that point, I understood that our thoughts and our words have power. So I just knew that by telling the world I'm fully recovered, this is going to be a good thing. It's giving my body the right message, my brain the right message. Um, that being said, now that I understand that, at least for me, there is definitely an autonomic nervous system component that was massive in this. And my ANS was never broken, right? So it's not like I fixed my ANS. I kind of retrained it and retaught it and built some new neural pathways, but it was never not working. So it's still working. So it's still going to assess threat, and it's still every once in a while going to give me symptoms if it thinks I'm pushing too hard. So I don't know that recovery is the right word. I don't know that remission is the right word. Rebalanced might be the best word. But I think that your nervous system, if this is a component of what was happening with you, is always going to push back a little bit and give you little warning bells. And I do have things sometimes after a really busy week and I start to not feel well. I'm like, ooh, this feels pretty reminiscent of CFS. The difference is now is that it's gone really quickly and I have kind of the tools to deal with it. And it's also, many people I talk to, and myself included, have this feeling post recovery that you're supposed to be perfect and you're never supposed to get tired again or have a headache or have a pain in your body or have any sort of symptom. And if you come into it with that mentality, then you get really stressed every time that happens. Like, is this back? And blah, blah, blah. And then you're just putting yourself in that whole fight or flight cycle again. So I think recovery is being able to live the life you want to live without limitations while having the tools and the understanding to know what's happening in your body and how and why symptoms work and how to deal with them when they come up, and having acceptance that you're always going to have symptoms for the rest of your life and there is no perfect happily ever after waiting for you. At least for me, that's my kind of long rambly definition of it.
I think that's really well said. And I think it mirrors, my own journey with just personal growth, dealing with, traumas that, right, growing as an individual. It's never a linear path. It's always cyclical, right? There's always kind of, you take some steps up and then you take some steps down. And I love what you said. When the symptoms come on, I have the tools to deal with them, and they don't last as long, right? And giving ourselves the grace of, hey, it's okay if the thing happens. It's okay if I regress, quote unquote. But I've been here before. I understand how to deal with this. I have the tools to deal with this, and I'm going to be okay, right? And as long as on the whole things are trending upward, or feeling like you're able to do the things that you want to do slowly but surely, right? That's what really matters. And speaking of the tools, so you've mentioned journaling, you've mentioned nervous system many times, and rebalancing. So we've actually partnered with you to create a nervous system rebalancing journal within Rosebud. And I'm really excited to see what the community thinks about it, and the impact that it's going to have on people. But I want people to hear from you. What are you hoping that people get from this nervous system rebalancing journal? Why did you want to create this?
It is so exciting. I just first have to say I have so much gratitude for you bringing me on board and working with me on this. This is such a powerful thing. I am a super fan of Rosebud. I don't know if people watching have all used it, but it's just changed my life. It is so incredible. I cannot believe the capability it has to help you and support you and learn about you and give you insights from your own life and just be supportive and compassionate and, suggest things and, tell you about how oh, yes, this thing that you just mentioned, that was a good insight of yours. And this is backed by research. And this study, blah, 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 happened. I'm like, wow, this is like every time I use it, my head explodes. I use it almost every day and I mostly multiple times a day. So just Rosebud in itself has so much potential for anyone, I believe, to help you with whatever you're working on in your life. And then with this nervous system rebalancing experience that is now in it, it is something that is trained and structured and set up. This is how I would explain it, to be a sort of available, supportive, compassionate, encouraging friend who can listen when you are struggling or trying to figure out what's happening in your body and when you're trying to figure out how to best navigate your recovery. Because we talked about the core of it is that autonomic nervous system rebalancing. So identifying those things that are triggering it, figuring out the things that are going to, soothe it, and having some strategies to both prevent things from happening and to deal with them when they do happen. And one of the really powerful things of this and Rosebud in general, which is one of the reasons I use it multiple times a day, is that, the more it knows about you, the better it can help tailor it to you. And the more it knows about your life, like you might have a symptom flare and you think, okay, I think it was maybe just that thing that just happened that set it off. I'm not sure. But through this, you can explore it and it will ask you questions and dig deeper and you can see the bigger picture. And it is really good at seeing patterns or suggesting things that you might not be able to see, especially when you're in the middle of a symptom flare. So I just think it's a really powerful tool to help you on your journey and help you have insights that you might not have, see patterns that you might not be seeing, work to prevent or eliminate some of these triggers in your life, and also build you up with strategies, help you identify your own strategies that you already know that are helpful, that have worked for you in the past. And also, if you're looking for it, suggest things for you in those moments that might help. Is my hope and my goal. And I'm probably missing things here. It can do so much. But for me, that's the biggest takeaway that I'm hoping for people when they're using this.
This journal can do so much. I'm really, really excited for people to try it out. I think it has a huge potential in helping people really create that awareness and identify patterns beyond, what we might consciously be aware of, because it's tracking what we talk about over time. It's helping to kind of look in the nooks and crannies and asking questions that, we might not necessarily be thinking of. And like you said, its ability to provide suggestions that we might not be thinking of, coping strategies, what we're calling nervous system soothers in the journal. I think it's going to have a tremendous impact and tremendous benefit to people. And I'm really excited to have people try it out and let us know what they think. So yeah, it's just the start. Really excited to see, where things go from here. And Raelan, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story with our community and also taking the time to develop this nervous system rebalancing journal for people to experience some of the wisdom from your recovery. But I know you're incorporating the wisdom that you've taken from all the people that you've spoken with about CFS, long COVID. You've spoken to dozens and dozens of people now and incorporating that into this journal. So thank you so much for sharing and looking forward to what's to come next.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much, Sean. What you've created here is a game changer. It is such an amazing support to have available, and I just appreciate you and all that you're doing as well. So thank you.